Your professors may be the people who influence your academic growth more than anyone else. Really, they should be. The Honors College seniors, this past class of 2018 from Duquesne, selected one of their favorite professors as a parting gift to you, the new freshman class, to be part of orientation and deliver this first lecture. But the second reason we wanted to have this as part of orientation, and last year was the first year we did it, we'd never done it before, is that there are a ton of adjustments you're making from high school to college during orientation. You're probably feeling that already. You're doing your own laundry. Maybe not. By next Wednesday, you really should be doing your own laundry. And you could be living with a roommate who most likely is not a member of your family. And when classes start, there's going to be a lot more transitions, and that's just a couple of days away on Monday. You'll learn, for example, to call your instructors professor or doctor, not Mrs., Mr., Ms., or Mr. That's a pretty simple one. Just do it. If you're not sure, just say professor, because we don't like the other monikers. Some of those, though, are really harder, right? You need to learn to structure your days, for example, around your schoolwork, despite many more hours of free time than most of you probably had in high school. But the one transition that can be the hardest is making the leap from high school student to university undergraduate scholar. This requires a different kind of sophistication in your thinking and in your relationships with your peers and your professors, and in understanding that everything your professors give you, especially in the core curriculum, is meant to challenge what you think you already know. So first lecture is the beginning of that challenge. It's that appeal to the greatness that is within you. First lecture is the first tap at your potential to have a deep impact on the world because of the Duquesne education that you are seeking. So I'm very pleased to introduce our first lecturer today. Dr. Judy Sue has been a professor in the Department of English at Duquesne since 2003. She's published books and articles on modern British literature and film, war, colonialism, and race. Her courses range from Introduction to Film and Race in Film, and those are the courses from which her lecture today is taken, so I think you're in for a very interesting lecture. And then on the other end of the spectrum, she also teaches graduate courses on literary theory and British modernism. She's very excited to greet this year's freshman class and hopes to be able to encounter many of you in her classroom in years to come. Dr. Sue? Is she here? Okay. I'm stuck.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts, and also thanks to James and Dan for shepherding me through this process. For those of you who are not planning to be English or film studies majors or minors, and I know that's probably most of you, you might consider literature and film simply as diversions, right? Things to indulge in after a hard day's work, to help you escape, to entertain yourselves. And of course, you're perfectly right in a lot of instances, right? Like dreams, literature and film, especially the kind that tells stories, right, helps you to enter worlds that are way more exciting, way more interesting, sometimes more beautiful, thrilling, sometimes all of the above. But also, like dreams, stories often provide a path into deeper understanding and analysis. So I'd like us all to proceed from this moment forward with the assumption that literature and film, the storytelling arts, can really set out the problems of society and help us reframe and diagnose and even sometimes work them out through leaps of the imagination. And in that way, stories really do help us get closer to the world instead of escape. So today, where's Cam? Oh, right. Thank you. Today I'm going to introduce you to a film technique called mise en scène. As you can see here, can you go back to the... Can't, thank you. So this is the term, as you can see by the accent there. It's a French term, and it means put in the scene. And it refers to the array of physical objects that are put in front of the camera. So we're talking about sets, frames within frames, costume, hair, makeup, props, right? All sorts of things that are actually there, including actors' positions in the frame and actors' positions in relation to each other. Now, if anyone here has worked in theater before, you know that every single thing that is put on that stage, put inside the scene, has to contribute to the story, right? This is a principle that was famously expressed by the Russian playwright, 19th century, Anton Chekhov. Remove everything that has no relevance to the story. If in the first chapter you say that there's a rifle hanging on the wall, it absolutely must go off in the second or third chapter. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there, right? So today we're going to be looking a bit at the mise-en-scène in a recent landmark American film, Get Out, 2017, written and directed by Jordan Peele. But before we get there to the clip, I want to introduce you to a whole bunch of terms, and you don't have to take notes, but you have to keep everything in your head. Okay. So the first thing you should know is that mise-en-scène can be broadly divided and categorized in two ways, realism and formalism. So what you're looking at here is a still from 2015 film Black Mass, which is a realist film. And this is a film that's based on the actual life of a Boston mobster named Whitey Bulger. And as you can see from the mise-en-scène, right, the filmmakers were trying to create an objective mirror of the real world. They're trying to make the artistic manipulation as invisible as possible. Slide. Contrast this with 1947 Black Narcissus. And it's a little hard to tell because of the lighting here, but you should note the distortion and the stylization of the elements of mise-en-scène. The dramatic mountainous background here is actually a matte painting. It's not real, and the filmmakers were not at all concerned with trying to recreate any kind of actual landscape in India where the film is set. So what they were trying to do instead was to take your breath away, right? This is the point of the fantastic or formalist quality of this film. Next. Frames within frames can draw the viewer's attention. They can also tell you about the level of authority or power of a character. So you notice here that authority and power are going back and forth between the adults in the foreground who are discussing the fate of the boy who's framed in the window in the background. And he will grow up one day to become one of the most powerful people in the world. Slide. Now, costume, hair, and makeup, extremely important for showing us the social status or even aspiration of a character. They also tell us a lot about psychology, the state of mind, even self-image. So here, the dramatic demise of Emma Bovary in the film Madame Bovary is relying really heavily on costume, hair, and makeup. Slide. Actors' positions in relation to each other tell us about the state of a relationship or connection. So intimate distance, right, signals deep affection, physical involvement on one hand, slide, and sometimes profound threat, slide. All the way up to public distance of 25 feet or more, and this signifies, of course, detachment or formality in a relationship. Slide. And then there are props. Right? Props can contribute to the stylistic consistency of a film. They can also act as expressive objects for the actor, and sometimes they can achieve very profound symbolic significance. Okay, slide. So what I'd like you to keep in mind besides all of that information are three very specific questions as you watch the clip. First, how might we read the mise-en-scène in the scene that introduces you to the film's richest metaphor, the sunken place? And second, what is it about these elements that makes it the scariest scene according to Jordan Peele? And third, how do these elements comprise a compelling analysis of racism despite the lack of burning crosses, slide, or hooded robes, right? These are the mise-en-scène elements that Hollywood usually trots out to signify racism in America. Okay, so Jan, can you play the clip?
Do you realize how dangerous smoking is?
Yeah.
Come in and sit with me, please. Just for a little bit. Please. Thank you. So you're comfortable enough, right?
It's perfect. Thanks.
Sure. You want to know how it works?
You just dangle a pocket watch in front of people's faces, is that it?
You watch a lot of TV.
When I was a kid.
Now you're feeling very sleepy. We do use focal points sometimes to guide someone into a state of heightened suggestibility.
Heightened suggestibility.
That's right. That's right. Do you smoke in front of my daughter?
I'm gonna quit, I
That's
promise.
my kid. That is my kid. You understand? What about your mother?
What about it? Wait, are we?
Where were you when she died?
I don't want to think about that. Watching TV.
Do you hear the TV? What do you hear?
Rain.
Rain. It was raining. You hear the rain?
Mm-hmm.
You hear it? Find it. Tell me when you found it. Come here, Chris. Look at me.
Found it.
Where was your mom?
She was coming home. She wasn't home.
From what? And what do you do?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I just sat there.
You didn't call anyone?
No.
Why not?
I don't know. I just thought that if I did, it'd make it real.
You're so scared. You think it was your fault? How do you feel now?
I can't move.
You can't.
Why can't I move?
You're paralyzed. Just like that day when you did nothing. You did nothing. Now, sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink. Now you're in the sunken place.
How many of you have seen this movie? I'm just curious. Oh, good. Okay. I'm not going to spoil anything by talking about it. From the start, the mise en scène sets up an unnerving disparity of power between these two characters, Missy Armitage and Chris Washington. Right? It's almost as if Chris is paralyzed even before going into the sunken place. First, notice that they are sitting at a social distance, which superficially upholds a code of politeness that gives Missy the upper hand. Right? Chris sits, he listens, he answers questions as a polite guest in her home, while she brazenly breaches his, verbally probing into his past. She breaches this code of politeness. Right? She violates his sense of privacy, his personal boundaries. And then notice, too, what they're wearing. He's wearing his pajamas, right, which adds to his sense of vulnerability. And you can also notice that chair, really nice chair, really probably very expensive leather chair, right? Comfy. But it's deep and it's trap-like at the same time. Slide. And then there's this. What could be cozier than a teacup? But this is a kind of weapon simultaneously, right? It's a cozy weapon, which is a paradox. And it's the perfect subterfuge. With this prosaic weapon, Missy is going to relegate Chris to the sunken place repeatedly throughout the film. And what about the sunken place itself? Slide. Now, we know that Chris's body is still perceivable when he's in the sunken place, but he himself loses all sense of bearing, and he loses his voice. This is the ultimate margin. Jordan Peele, the writer and director, referring to the situation of African American men in this country, in a tweet had this to say: "We are all in the sunken place. The sunken place means that we're marginalized. No matter how hard we scream, the system silences us." And in that tweet, he was referring specifically to the prison industrial complex. But in order to show the effects of the sunken place psychologically, the filmmakers, they had to show what it feels like to be there. And that required formalist style rather than realist style. Now, stepping back here, you can say that what the scene does is actually combine these two polar styles. Right? You have the homey realism of the sitting room and the kind of otherworldly formalism of the sunken place. And it is the combination or juxtaposition of these two styles that creates this uncanny feeling of horror. Right? And analytically, you can say, too, that the combination of these styles suggests the proximity of the comfortable suburban home on one hand and the margins. Right? What the filmmakers and the writer are doing here is kind of pushing us to recognize, at least temporarily, the ways in which the kind of suburban, everyday home kind of leads to a nightmarish system that is all too familiar to us no matter where we live. Slide. And what do you make of that frame within the frame? It kind of looks like a television screen. So from the sunken place, Chris looks out at the world through this screen. Slide. And that, of course, calls up this deeply traumatic personal memory of sitting paralyzed in front of the TV on the night that his mom died. But it's also a commentary on television as a mass medium for racial minorities in this country. Slide. The cultural critic Bell Hooks, in her essay, The Oppositional Gaze, has this to say: When most black people in the United States first had the opportunity to look at film and television, they did so fully aware that mass media as a system of knowledge and power was reproducing and maintaining white supremacy. To stare at the television or mainstream movies, to engage its images, was to engage its negation of black representation. It was the oppositional black gaze that responded to these looking relations by developing independent black cinema. So what Hooks is elucidating here is the paralysis that many people of color experience when watching mass media portrayals of characters that may look like them, but act in ways that feed damaging stereotypes of racist fantasies. So one strategy for the way out of this paralysis is the production and proliferation of different ways of seeing or looking, right? As she says here, the development of an independent black cinema. And the film, too, suggests different ways of looking. So Chris discovers rather accidentally that the flash on his cell phone brings people out of the sunken place, right? What's the significance of that? Well, as we all know, the development of cell phone video technology for recording and challenging instances of everyday racism cannot be overestimated. Slide. And importantly here, Chris, by trade, is a professional photographer. And he captures scenes of everyday life in black neighborhoods that is often obscured by mass media. These different ways of looking are extremely important. And like many significant modern artists, what Jordan Peele is doing is asking a set of coherent, cohesive questions. First, how are the margins of society created? Who or what benefits by these margins? What does it feel like to be relegated to them? And in this film, a further question is asked, how to get out? Now, I started this lecture by talking about the sort of diagnostic and analytical function of stories, and I have one more to share with you today, and that is community building. Right? What creates a community? More than anything else, it's a sense of a shared past and a sense that the future is shared as well. In other words, a common story. Now, as you look around you in this room, you have a whole collection of near perfect strangers, right? You guys only met 3 or 4 days ago. Believe it or not, you are going to find in this room the best friends you've made in your entire life. So as you go forward, these people are going to be here for you. When you're down, they're going to pick you up, and they're going to be there to celebrate your joys and accomplishments with you. This is your new community. There are countless minds in the Duquesne community. And my advice to you as a Duquesne professor is to obviously pick up a film studies minor, but that's neither here nor there. My real advice is watch as many movies as possible with your new community and use these stories to explore and to combine and to incorporate lots of different experiences and many different points of view. And that way you can shape one heart of a community that is responsible to the world at large. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts and Dr. Sue. So just a reminder for you all, we do have the DU Majors sessions later today with a few other programs, scattered throughout the afternoon. And then we just hope to see you all back here for the talent show at 7:30. So you all are good to go. Thank you.